Lecompte. The cathedral's west rose window is the crowning achievement of their careers. It is the cathedral's most celebrated window and was once called the most beautiful window in all of Christendom.
The essential experience that launched the window was in September, October. Peggy and I went out to look at leaves, and we were living in Reston, and the leaves were so beautiful. Some in shadow, and some in full sunshine, and some mysterious and dim, and others just like trumpets. And trying to make a design that said that. And I worked and worked and worked and worked and worked and worked. And this is it.
The rose window is certainly special in my career, and it only happens once in 1,000 lifetimes to have a chance to be working on a rose window of that dimension.
It's presumptuous to try to say, this shows. Oh, no, it doesn't. This is a meditation, you might say, just one person's meditation on the complexity of the universe. I dare not say more than just it's an unknowing whisper in the dark, but it's happy.
After finishing the West Rose in 1980, Rowan was commissioned to begin work on a series of large windows at the clerestory level of the cathedral. The first of these was the Isaiah window. The window's location within the cathedral led to an experiment, transparency of the glass.
I consulted with the building committee, and they all agreed that with this blazing nave, the choir looked like a dungeon. Very, very dark. So we decided that if we could make the nave dark at its end near the choir, you wouldn't be feeling that you're sitting in a place bathed with light looking into a pit. Make it dark at that end so that the choir doesn't look so terribly dark by contrast. So it was dark, deliberately very dark.
In 2005, cathedral friend and patron Hugh Trumbull Adams made a gift to the cathedral so that this dark window could be replaced with a new window of similar design, but with lighter glass. In fact, Rowan was given a commission to replace one of his own windows.
More variation. I'm using one green, for instance, and whereas in the glass there will be at least three. The idea being there will be a kind of richness of color, just as in the Impressionists, in Van Gogh. It's a marvelous, this combination of tones, tints, and shades are so wonderful. It's Isaiah who was in the temple one day and was told that there would be an angel who would come and put a hot coal on his lips, and that would purify him. And yes, he would be able to eat the next day, but this would purify him and prepare him for his ministry. So here came the angel. I loved architecture, and therefore, when I was 14, and an aunt visiting from Canada proposed taking me to Washington for one day. We were met at Union Station and were startled by a very nice, dusky gentleman who said that he would be delighted to show us the wonder of Washington. And it was then just a little before 9 a.m. And he would drive us all around anywhere we wanted until 12 a.m. And how much would that be, said my aunt. And he said, ma'am, that would be $5. Oh, that sounded pretty good to her. So away we went in his cab. And late in the morning, when we were up on Embassy Row, it chanced that we went past an opening in some trees, and I saw an astonishing sight, which I reasoned must be this Gothic cathedral that I had heard of. And Aunt said, why, dear, would you like to go see it? And I said, oh, yes, Aunt, please. We reached the door, we pulled it open, and there was absolute darkness beyond. That was in our eyes, because when we stepped through the door and it closed behind us, we were really in an enchanted place. There was only a perfectly charming blue rose window opposite, hanging in the air up there, with other windows nearby. And they were all in lovely color. And I'd never seen color in architecture like this. I'd never seen architecture like this. It was so huge and so beautiful that I was simply thunderstruck. It was like a meeting with God. Well, it was. It was. I was overwhelmed by the beauty, by the mysteriousness. I was just enthralled. I was petrified with joy. These full-size drawings are called cartoons. And they were called cartoons before anybody drew a picture in the funny paper. And I just slug along and try to do everything I'm doing as well as I can, but generally finding that it doesn't please me. And I go over and over and over and hope that somehow during all this, I'll think, well, I can't do any better than that. And it may not be right, but to hell with it. No, you don't say to hell with it. You say, I give up. Temporarily. Drawing on one of the hardest things here, to get the angles of the hand right. And this is an area of much change and uncertainty. Hand's too small for figure. Hand has to be bigger. When I was 16, I was, by glorious chance, introduced to the architect of the cathedral by a mutual friend. And I went and heard him on the subject of stained glass. And that was an education. He said he wanted stained glass windows in his buildings to have richness and sparkle. He emphasized richness and sparkle. And those sounded like wonderful ideals to me. I mean, there was nothing in me that shrank back. And I think there are people that would be offended by that, by those demands, because they'd say, oh no, it should be mute. It should be quiet. It should be restful, which is why people fall asleep in church. But in short, it should be soothing and not arousing. And Mr. Froman very definitely wanted it to be something that inspired. And at that time, too, I had a small commission from Goucher College in Baltimore. They wanted a panel of stained glass about 7 inches wide and 20 inches tall. He took the panel and put it up. And I must say, the angels were with me because it looked absolutely splendid. And there was a huge rainbow projected through it. His compliments were so obviously sincere and so pungent that my head spun. And he said, there's a place I'd like you to see. And we went into a strange room, the like of which I'd never seen. We were in the unfinished chapel dedicated to St. Dunstan. And in its far wall was a single window, and it was completely open. He said that the window that you showed me just now is the kind of window that I've always dreamed of having in that chapel. Well, I was more than intoxicated because of the idea of being able to do something for the cathedral was for me just totally overwhelming. And I couldn't help starting little sketches. He was delighted when I put before him the full-size pen and ink drawing. And he said, well, I like these very much, but we'll see what the building committee says. He said the building committee doesn't have much on, and I will be back in hardly more than an hour. Oh, just before he left, he said, and he was very formal always, by the way, Mr. Leconte, how old are you? And I said, I'm 16, Mr. Frohman. Good God, he said. I thought you were older. And then he took the drawings and disappeared. When he came back, he said, I'm delighted to be able to tell you that the building committee has unanimously approved your two drawings for the window in St. Dunstan's chapel. And of course, again, everything went blurry before me. And really, I had never experienced such extremes of joy as I did then, never.
When Rowan finishes a cartoon, he sends it off to master craftsman Dieter Goldkula, who must translate this drawing into glass and lead. For nearly 40 years, this collaboration has produced some magnificent windows.
The drawing allows you to keep control over all these many pieces, because each pattern is going to be coded or numbered, so, and that tells me where it belongs. But you see, it's taking shape. Now this is an interesting see, it eliminates a little bit more than 1/16 of an inch for the core of the lead. This is what I eliminate. And it's being replaced by the core of the lead, otherwise it would never fit together. Multiply that by the number of pieces, it just wouldn't go. There was a family business. My father was in commercial glass, storefronts or furniture, glass tops, that sort of thing. And my father was also quite an entrepreneur, and he had 3 sons, and he wanted every of his boys in the business. So he thought it would be a neat idea to open up a leaded glass shop. And I was drawn to that. The next step was then my father sending me to a technical school where I served an apprentice, and there again the faculty was all dislocated people from Bohemia, which historically is a glass-making environment. It was a school which taught the history of stained glass, and then making or designing your own panels and making them. And it became a love affair, and it hasn't left me. And it has to do with the magic of glass and the relationship it has with light. And that is a lifelong pursuit of mine. What has the greatest influence on me is the medium, the glass itself, the liquidity. It is how the glass refracts the light with all its imperfections like air bubbles or ripples. It scatters the light. Well, and also I feel often the glass itself, the individual pieces talk to me rather than this, in a way, dead reflective surface. And the glass, to me, just the feel of it is, all these, for instance, this is the edge, a fire-polished edge. That to me is just like such a smoothness, and such a feel to it. Well, this is the sharp edge now. And also I know the process of making glass, the effort that goes into this, and the physical labor and the, in a way, dedication of these people to devote their life to it. The more traditional 19th century way of making this glass is, it's a factory environment, it's a continuous process. The kiln is never cooled down. They work in shifts, they work on teams, most likely 3 or 4 people. And the initial gather on a blow type is done by the lowest person on that team. And then he may probably create the initial bubble. The master glass blower will then enlarge that to a balloon or cylindrical shape. When I watch these people work, they do not talk. It's like a ballet around a furnace. Okay, this is it. It's a nice medium red, ruby red. It's quite critical that the size of the glass fits the pattern. If the fit is just right, not too loose and not too tight, that will contribute to the glass or the panel's longevity. If there's any slack, gravity will eventually cause it to sag. In the 16th century, they discovered that a diamond can score a glass, and along that score line, the glass breaks. But then the actual fitting occurred with a grossing tool that nibbled away along the edges to make it fit. And I've seen medieval glass where the cutting or the grossing was exquisite. Now, Here I have the biggest piece, and I would love to have some shading in that piece. Now, this is a juicy piece. Now, when I see this blue-green next to a different shade of, and this slight variation from light to dark, that to me is when the colors start to sing. And also I like to see now this form emerging once I have this piece in. So, yeah, that's where I get my, but then also owners often a need to change pieces. So if I get emotionally too involved, then I feel I own it. And then for me, that would be very difficult, or it's difficult to accept then changes.
Once Dieter finishes selecting and cutting the glass, Rowan comes in to inspect his choices. This often stirs up a bit of creative tension.
Here are the two pieces that you wanted to recut, right?
Well, I think that
No, the wrong space. So. Or may I,
please.
the wrong space? The hole is up there. No, it's for that.
Good God. Thank you so much. Oh, yeah. Dieter, I think that if this were in some version of dark or dull red,
Dark.
not so, perhaps not so dark, but if this were reddish, maybe in one or two other spots reddish, I think it'll tie together. That's it.
On this, I couldn't make that decision. And once I cut it, and then I feel sorry for the piece. So I rather have him make the decision and have the responsibility for the piece.
Most reasonable. Most reasonable.
So, but ultimately, it's your window. There's always a second guess.
Well, I think I make what I think is the right choice, and it turns out not to be.
Yeah, but ultimately, I don't want to waste glass. That's what it boils down to, and
Yes. That's trying to throw out any.
yeah, that's
Oh, there'll be a day.
all right.
Well, Dieter leaves.
But, well,
After they settle on the glass, the panels back to his studio and begins the solitary, arduous process and controlling the light.
Everything that I do is an experiment, and it gets changed and discarded. That seems to be the way I'm working, looking at what I have thought of having there before, and rejecting or accepting. The paint is brown smoothness, but it's glass, and if you look at it through a microscope, you see that it's all kinds of which we are, with our elephant skins, unable to feel unless provided. There's no rule, except the best one. There's a wonderful book thing written in 1905 by a Londoner an Englishman named Christopher Whall, W-H-A-L-L. It's called Stained Glass Work. Half the book is how to do it, but the other half of the book is called why to do it. And his whole insistence is on making it a personal cause. Don't do it for money. You'll never have enough money. Do it only because you're just in love with it. Would pay to be allowed to do it. Then. And I wish that anybody doing stained glass should do it for that reason. Because the world is full of awful windows made by people who were anxious to, who had no skill, except their hunger for money.
I think I'm in love with the process because that's what I'm involved with on a daily basis. There's also something in me that urge to be working or to be making something. And I'm not spending my time to contemplating the finished product. There are fleeting moments when I'm conscious of, hey, that looks pretty good. And I'm proud of being involved in a row of windows. The glass has to fire at a temperature of about 1250 degrees. But it's important that the temperature of the paint, the lower temperature than the melting point of the glass. And 1250 degrees for this type of paint is just about the right temperature. Way beyond 1250, the glass itself will deform. Probably at 1400, 1500, it will already be to a point where it loses its shape. And at 1700, certainly it will have lost its shape. And it will continue to deform completely and becomes a puddle. And the temperature controls on the kilns are set to reach that temperature within 25 minutes. And we are already in the process, have reached 920 degrees, and we have, let me see, 6 minutes left. And I hope it knows what it's doing.
Back in his studio, Rowan is constantly tweaking the window, changing out pieces of glass to get just the right effect.
Well, I want to change the light piece because his skin, as seen in his hands and face, is a fine, deep tan. And these feet, I'd like to have at least match those hands. I developed a strong ball tremor in my right hand about a year ago. It happens that I'm right-handed in writing and in drawing and in glass cutting. Now, here comes the excitement. Not bad. Not perfect, not bad. This is a comedy of errors. A nightmare. It's fine. I'm gonna need to do this too.
In the assembly, I use lead strips that I produce myself. I also cast lead into ingots, and then the ingots get milled in a lead mill that produces this channel. tighter the pieces fit, the longer the panel will stay upright. If there's any slag, it would cause the panel to shift. So therefore my cutting, fitting, testing. Now, deviation from the plan. See, by pieces having been recut, fiddling now shouldn't. Now I have to make it fit, which I just am not very fond of. Slight adjustment.
I don't know, I'm gonna wait and see. I don't feel like it's that much.
Back up here.
Street.
Back up your arm.
Much better.
No.
Sometimes it's just a fraction.
I don't understand what this is. It's a little while ago. I was 94.
Voila. See, once I get the panel back from Rowan, then it's totally my control again. And I can set the pace.
I have felt
Yeah.
it all day.
And then it becomes in a way mine until it is in place.
That's why I didn't go back to Karen's.
It's like, well, no, it's not like doing the head of the Statue of Liberty, but it has to be very coarse or big and bold, or it's not going to show up at all from a distance. I go way off and look at it, and I come up close and look at it. And the point is to get something that would not disgust anybody seeing it close up, and yet will be reasonably effective seen at a distance.
Dad called me.
The complexities of line, color, glass, and even technical structure that Rowan must keep track of is really quite astounding, especially when you consider that at any given time, he is only working on a small fraction of an enormous window. The window is now more than 3 years behind schedule. This delay has forced Dieter to resign from the project as the work is bumping into his other commitments. Commitments like restoring the windows in Mercersburg, Pennsylvania, that actually inspired young Rowan.
I had already planned for this particular commission a year ago or so, and I couldn't back out of that commitment, I felt. And I also enjoy this particular artist and the draftsmanship in these windows and the coloration of these windows. It's quite extraordinary.
Rowan has asked Mary Perkin Higgins, who is a former president of the American Glass Guild, to take over for Dieter and help finish the window.
Mary's very, very good, and I would put her only second to Dieter, but she's very fine.
60. I'm 60.
I'm really thrilled that Rowan asked. It's so much fun to work on a project like this, and I love working with Rowan. I just love working in stained glass, and it's a beautiful project to work on.
Anybody gets that.
It is interesting because
know
Dieter
anybody
has
that
done
gets
the color selection for all of the lancets. I am doing it for the
got
rose,
6 years.
and so I need it to fit in with what he's done and still be true to what I can bring to it and still make Rowan happy. Rowan is the ultimate judge of everything. It's his window. He is the one who needs to be happy with it.
Not only is Mary cutting the glass for this portion of the
how my
window,
friends get
she has also
that,
painted.
what I'm saying.
For this, I really have to paint it
$40.
in style because, as I understand it, because most of the window has been painted by Rowan. Rowan's style is to pretty much use streaks
Everybody
and
gets
dark black
different
lines, almost like a woodcut. In any stained glass
That's the way
work,
the
it's
government
the line is very important. It has a certain energy to it, and so you try to draw the lines with energy so that the energy actually becomes part of the piece. You can feel the artist's hand in just the
Government's not
stroke,
equal.
and
They
that
get three
actually
people
does
different.
impart energy. All lines have a certain power to them, so
I
that's
had
what
to
I'm
say
trying to
that
do.
about
find the
Nanette
power.
was talking about it, and I was agreeing with her that you were that you were getting a lot. That doesn't mean that come out of my mouth.
Wow! Wow! Oh, Mary, you've had such a good time.
I have.
I am very, 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 very pleased. I will make the light a little bit savager.
Okay.
But,
Like
I
I
hope
said,
you
that don't bother me one bit.
I want you to be happy.
I want you
You
to
know,
be
you
happy.
complaining about it,
Both
every
be
day,
happy.
talking about it.
Such as will be seen from the floor.
I don't think there'd be any way that I could have painted it and then he would have just loved it as it was, because I painted as best I can understand it according to what Rowan wants. But only Rowan knows what Rowan actually wants. And so here he is finding it, and he can add and subtract as he wishes to. So
Why
I'm
did
really
she
happy
even bring
with
this up?
how he's bringing it to life. I'm
Because,
just glad he didn't take all the paint off.
Looks jolly to me. Oh, yes.
I didn't, like I said, I didn't
I
say
declare
it,
it's done.
say it, she said it.
Well, congratulations.
I just told you about it, and I
Mary,
shouldn't have. I just
To
mixed
you
up.
for praise.
Rowan's stained glass was subject to review, just like any piece of art in the cathedral. A small group looked at a composite photograph of the window's panel, and they determined that there were enough inconsistencies between the approved cartoon and the completed panel, so the window could not be
I
brought
drew it back
forward
in
to the full
when I got
fabric
on
and finance committee.
SSI, or before, and then when I got SSI, they cut
See,
me back to $20.
message
That said
I
it
got
ain't worth
was
going down there and
that
talking
the
to them every 6
committee
months for.
that looks and feels at not the glass, but photographs that had been taken with electric lights. And that's what their complaints and doubts were based on. And indeed, the original contract for this window says that there shall be no opinions about it until the committee can see it in place in the church.
In September of 2010, Rowan and his wife Peggy traveled to Washington to discuss the window with the Reverend Timothy Boggs, who, at the time, was the provost of the cathedral.
Government won't stand out anything, they'll take care of it.
Reverend Boggs had it is that he and the
What's me that way?
Dean's committee and other people had prepared
It's coming for the-
of things they did not like about his window. And
Well, I'm not trying to
his
say what
statement,
I couldn't
which
do.
was
I'm not, I said the government, I'm not
very
talking about
strong
you.
and
Get out there and get food
emphatic,
stamps, you can't
said
buy
that there
food,
is no
food,
further
you ain't got a place
decision
to
or
go.
discussion about this. The window will not be installed in the cathedral. Which was a blow and also a startling way to put it, that there is no further discussion. This is,
When that's said by a
You're
politician,
not homeless, Reggie.
one smile.
I was really stunned because I had seen the window in my studio, of course, and it's an incredibly beautiful window. And now I had only seen the lancet that I did, so my first reaction was, okay, maybe there are issues with the other lancets and I haven't seen them. But then when I saw the documentation that the committee was basing its decision on, I thought, well, they haven't seen the window either, because this has got nothing to do with the window. And that's when I put together the photographs I had and the information I had, the knowledge I have of stained glass, into a report to try to make it more understandable. One issue was that the angel was holding a coal up to Isaiah, and the coal should be a glowing ember. And that was the lens that we had actually put together here at the studio. And ember is a beautiful yellow with surrounded by orange, red. It really is a gorgeous, gorgeous glowing ember, and it really works well. But again, in the committee's photographs, it's pink somehow. And it's pink, it's dull, and it blends in completely with the glass around it. It's all the same color. And I cannot understand how that could have happened. There's also light bouncing off of the front of it, which is not something that you will get when the window is in place. It will be surrounded by blackness. The presentation to the committee had a stark white background, which actually, even on a piece of paper, it just flares around the window and you can't really appreciate the colors. And it makes any dark-ish colors look really dark.
We gave a copy of that to the canon and requested that he look at it. He said, I'll look at that sometime, but the decision is the window we want. There is no further discussion.
There often is a tension between committees and artists. What I would have to say about Rowan's work on this window is that it is the culmination of a lifetime spent contemplating stained glass and its issues, and how to make windows that really have life, energy, and substance to them. And he has made many masterpieces. He is not someone who takes stained glass lightly. He thinks about all of the elements in a window and how he can put them all together to make a window that's alive. It's not an easy thing to do, and we see many windows around us that really have no life to them whatsoever. But Rowan's have life, they have energy, and all of his decisions are related to trying to get to that in a window.
Move it back.
So I don't know what the outcome is going to be, Peter. I mean, this is just a couple hours ago.
I think that it will be pretty good.
Where's the little pan thing at?
Oh, yeah, don't worry about it. These are on.
There's always this underlying goal of perfection, and that is elusive. I will never be perfect, but that's what is behind it. And to do something as well as I can is still my pursuit. And then I can only think of how lucky I am that I have a chance to work on projects that will last and will maybe have impact on future generations.
I like your new shoes.
Mary's report actually did have an effect in a subsequent meeting with Rowan and Peggy. The dean and Andrew Hollinger said the cathedral will look at the window again with fresh eyes. A team was assembled to review the window and to look at some of the panels through natural light. They determined that the next step would be to install the two side panels, replacing the existing dark panels.
It is possible that once the two new lancets are installed, they may have a better understanding of how the window works, and they may decide to install the other two lancets.
I would like that, and I'd like to live long enough to see it. But who can tell? All of us can vanish away before we know it.
Yeah, really.
But I would like very much to see that in place, in the hope that I would say, oh, it's better than it was before. But if I say, oh, it's worse than it was before, that is disappointing.
So at this point, I will be installing two lancets of the S8 window in October.
In August of 2011, a major earthquake rattled the Washington, D.C. area. One of the hardest hit buildings was Washington Cathedral. With over $17 million in damage, the cathedral's focus had to shift, and the installation of the window was put on hold. On February 11th, 2014, at the age of 88, Rowan LeConte passed away, unable to withstand a bout of pneumonia. The cathedral celebrated his life and legacy in a memorial service that July. Two months later, in early October 2014, the cathedral's new administration was finally able to use the scaffolding installed for repairing earthquake damage and revisit the issues surrounding this window. After 3 years of darkness in the cathedral attic, portions of the new window once again saw daylight.
No, you think it's all like that, too, so
Mary Higgins assembled a crew to begin the delicate, difficult task of removing the old panels and installing the two side lenses of Rowan's creation.
The new windows are much lighter than the ones we're taking out. We have one of the original windows sitting in between two of the new windows, and it looks completely black compared to these other windows, which have rich color in them and which are really sparkling. So you can see why Rowan wanted to redo the window, because the other window is so black, and it fits in better with all of the other windows in the nave clerestory. I think the committee can't help but notice how much lighter they are and how they fit in with the other windows in the nave, but I have no idea what decisions they will make. There's just no way to tell.
When they actually got a chance to look at the whole window in place, the decision was that they really felt that for a lot of reasons, the newer window, the window that Mr. LeConte had made, was really better for that space than a kind of mixture of old and new. I mean, and I felt when I looked at it that it would be better to have one aesthetic vision rather than a mixture of two aesthetic visions, his earlier window and his later window. And I agreed with him, and I thought that the later window was a better choice. So they reversed that original decision and actually went with the newer window, the later window. Art in the church is always a dance between the individual artist and the needs of the community. And I'm just grateful that we're in a place now where we are able to get closer to a mutual understanding of Mr. LeConte's vision for that window and our vision for that window, and that they're now in the same place.
So we just put the last panel in of Rowan's Isaiah window, and it looks amazing. And it feels really good to be at this point, to have accomplished this. I think the window looks fantastic. It fits in very much better with the windows surrounding it than the original did. I think theater would love it, and he's done an incredible job of having movement in the red. I mean, red is a rich color to start with, but then he's made it exciting and interesting by the way that he's done the color selections. I think Rowan would be extremely pleased with this, and I'm very pleased. I think he made a beautiful window.
When the angel arrives, there will be terror, but say yes. The sound of wings like the breaking of a mirror, but say yes. It will arrive where you're little and you're scared. It will lay claim to the things you've never shared. And though your heart and your soul are unprepared, say yes. And it may tear you from home and family, but say yes. It may demand you become a refugee, but say yes. And when you're cold and you're homeless and you're poor, when you're in pain in a room without a door, and when the angel returns and asks for more, say yes.
Rowan and Dieter's legacy at the cathedral will be everlasting. Rowan is clearly one of the finest stained glass artists in the world, and we're just so pleased to be the showcase for so much of his beautiful, beautiful work. Dieter was a craftsman, unparalleled. His attention to detail shows through, and their names will be cherished here and remembered forever.
When the legions of angels call you blessed, say yes. And were you faithful in each and every test, say yes. And when they ask you in story and in song, were you upheld and protected all along? And did the power of the Spirit make you strong? Say yes.
I want, gaiety, song and dance. Let there be music. Let there be color. Let there be light.